There had not yet been a sunrise. But even then, there was light. You have not seen what I have seen.
Welcome back, everyone. This will be my brand new Lord of the Rings trailer video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs here. There's a whole bunch going on, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I will be doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get them all. It's starting September 2nd. I believe there's supposed to be 8 episodes, and they might wind up dropping the first couple of episodes on day 1. But the most important things about this trailer, like the most eye-catching things, are some of the First Age flashbacks, or what seem like First Age flashbacks to the War of Wrath. That's the war that Sauron's master Morgoth fought against the combined forces of humans, elves, and the Valar. After which they essentially trapped him in an abyss. He was too powerful to kill, but they could trap him for all time. Sauron, who's basically like the main villain of the show during the Second Age, was his disciple during the War of Wrath during the First Age, and when the War of Wrath was happening, Sauron had been defeated during a different battle. He feared that Morgoth would punish him for his defeat. He hid for the rest of the war, and then continued to hide after the Valar were punishing Morgoth to avoid being judged by them as well. It seems like we get a shot of him during the trailer. Like, I do believe that he is going to be the person in the meteor. Just because the visualization of the meteor makes it seem kind of like a flaming eye, like the Eye of Sauron, I think the Sauron is going to be that meteor person. You also see the flames of the meteor coming inward like magic is being used. No human would be able to withstand flames like that, so clearly it's a very powerful person, and Sauron was capable of creating illusions and changing his appearance during this period. Just an early theory, but you can let me know if you think that the person in the meteor really is Sauron. And just to be clear, the most powerful characters that get involved in most Lord of the Rings stories, especially during the First Age and the Second Age, are the Valar. They're kind of like the highest level of gods that were created by the one true god of the Tolkien Lord of the Rings universe called Eru Ilúvatar. He rarely gets involved, but usually when people think of him, they think about the downfall of Numenor, which obviously is probably something they're going to do in the final season of the show, but it's going to be a long time before that happens. There's a lot of Numenor that we see during this trailer too. But like if you look at the chart here, under the Valar, or basically the Maiar, they're another level of gods, but they're not quite as powerful or quite as old as the Valar. Sauron was one of the Maiar. Gandalf, for instance, is part of the Istar wizards. The wizards are also related to the Maiar, so Gandalf was kind of like Sauron. Not quite as powerful as Sauron, but that's why Gandalf is so powerful. So basically all the wizards are kind of like cosmic beings walking around in human form, but there are all kinds of rules about how they can use their powers, so they're not nearly as powerful as they are in their true forms. That's why Gandalf kind of seems like he comes back to life during the Lord of the Rings movies later in the timeline. The big threat, the great darkness that is coming that everyone's talking about in the trailer is obviously Sauron, and that's meant to be hammered home by the meteor crashing to Earth at the end of the trailer. Like, oh, you think darkness is coming? No, it's already here. But at least at the beginning of the series, very few people actually believe what Galadriel is saying about this coming threat. The opening scene is of Galadriel talking about the dawning of the world, like in the beginning of the world itself, and this opening shot is of a boat entering Numenor. Numenor obviously famous because of the downfall of Numenor. That happened after Sauron was able to trick Pharazôn, this character here, into invading the Undying Lands, basically, thinking that it would give them immortality. How wrong they were. One of the other cool details about the Numenorians too, and you see this in the architecture, like it's meant to look beautiful in their capital, but all of this other architecture that you see that looks like Numenorian architecture, it's all built by them. So like for instance, Gondor, even though it was built by Isildur and his father, technically was built by Numenorians. Pretty much like all the really big, really notable structures that you see in Middle-earth during the Lord of the Rings movies later in the timeline was also built by Numenorians. This city, while she's talking about light, is the city of Tirion, and these two trees provide light to all of Valinor, the big continent of the Undying Lands. The person here that's walking up on the hillside is Galadriel's brother, Finrod. The reason why this is a flashback is because he died during the War of Wrath, and Morgoth destroyed the trees. That's why I think that, at least during episode 1, we might get some crazy epic flashback, like a prologue that we got at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. I'll talk about this later when we get to that scene in the trailer, but Galadriel has this special grudge against Sauron that a lot of the other elves don't have, so I'll explain why that is, like why she wants to hunt him down so badly. This is another elven city. It could be Lindon, because that's where Gil-galad, the High King of the Elves, rules from. We see some scenes later there in the trailer. Then there's voiceover from one of the Harfoot characters. They're kind of like the show's version of hobbits that existed earlier in the timeline. Hobbits didn't come till the Third Age, so technically they can't do hobbits, so they're doing Harfoots instead. She's talking about how elves have forests to protect, dwarves have their mines, as we see Khazad-dûm during its prime when the dwarves were still thriving there. She says men have their grains, but we Harfoots have each other, we are safe. Just as you see the meteor crashing across the sky, like Sauron crashing across the sky. But then they show you the big deal here, Khazad-dûm, during the Second Age. You see full-on life everywhere, like it's teeming with life, and very active. It's an entire kingdom underground, the mightiest kingdom of the dwarves at this time. All the architecture should look familiar to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. The joke that Gimli told about them calling it a mine was meant to be a reference to how epic it was. Like, they call it a mine, but it's really so much more. And even though this is meant to be underground, the reason why there'd be all these green plants growing here is probably just because this is close to the entrance. The whole reason why Khazad-dûm eventually fell is because they mined too deeply and awoke the Balrog who had been hibernating, and essentially it was the Balrog that was responsible for the war that killed all the dwarves and kicked them out of the mines. The one that you see them fighting during Fellowship of the Ring. There's a waterfall shot with Galadriel talking to one of the other elves that were part of the party that she's traveling with in the north. Notice how different their swords are too. Elven swords are a really big deal. Usually they carry some kind of enchantment. They're like some of the finest blades that you can wield. Also, speaking of elven craftsmanship, this is Celebrimbor, the person who created the 3 elven rings of power. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes the show to actually show the forging of the rings, like when that'll happen. Will it be season 1, season 2, season 3, who knows? You notice Galadriel's party finds this snow troll here as they're searching for Sauron. She winds up fighting it later in the trailer. And just to explain the reason why she's so hardcore about this, why she's going around to all these different groups trying to marshal support to find Sauron, is because 2 of her brothers died during a battle during the War of Wrath, and her other brother Finrod, the one that we saw on the hillside looking at the 2 trees, he died in Sauron's dungeons, which is why she hates Sauron so much. Then young Elrond gets into an argument with Galadriel, and she says that he's not seen what she's seen, and they show you her memory of the aftermath of the War of Wrath. That's what's going on in all these red scenes with all the bodies floating. This structure behind them is basically like a tower sinking into the ocean. It's meant to show like a whole part of this landmass, like an entire city sinking into the water. The War of Wrath was so devastating to the planet that it sank a giant portion of it. So I think that's the idea of what we're seeing here, like all these dead bodies being buried underneath the ocean. This is Gil-galad, High King of the Elves, talking to Elrond, saying that darkness will march over the face of the earth, it'll be the end of everything, basically as they show you all the main races of the show. Elves, Númenóreans, Harfoots, and the regular middlemen. These people here are called middlemen because they're like regular humans who were not Númenóreans and they were just already living in Middle-earth this time. But it sounds like Galadriel, Elrond, and Gil-galad will be some of the only people in the show, at least so far that we know, that won't be totally fooled by Sauron when he shows up. Like they'll be waiting for some darkness to come. This seems like an army of orcs attacking a tower that Arondir is on. It seems like they capture him because you see him fighting with a chain around his ankle later, like he's fighting some kind of wolf creature. This scene seems like Galadriel sailing in the swan ship with her group of elves. They might be trying to sail back to Valinor, and that might not work, causing the shipwreck that she gets in later. This is Tar Miriel, who's meant to be the regent of Númenor, the current ruler, and Pharazôn, her cousin. At this point, he's kind of like her trusted advisor. Obviously, he winds up doing very shady things during the course of the show that lead to the downfall of Númenor. He's kind of like a Littlefinger type character trying to usurp power from his cousin. Even though technically you have to blame Sauron, who's the person to trick him into invading the Undying Lands, causing the actual downfall itself. The white petals that she's looking at might be from the white tree. The white trees in Lord of the Rings, like the one we see in Gondor, shed their petals when they sense a threat approaching. And like the poster that they revealed for her, she's holding one of the blossoms. Which it makes sense because of the meteor and Sauron coming to Middle-earth, this great threat that they keep talking about. Like the tree senses the threat of Sauron, and that's why it's shedding its petals. There's another wide shot of Khazad-dûm as Elrond goes there to convince the dwarves about Sauron to get their help again. This is a scene of Durin IV smashing the boulder. His father, Durin III, is the one wearing the crown. This is Halbrand in Númenor. This is Arondir, like I said. His armor looks amazing, obviously during a different scene. It seems like it's depicting an Ent just because it's got this wooden face on it. And I believe in the last teaser they did show some actual Ents. This is a big cavalry of Númenóreans led by Galadriel. This is a scene of Galadriel's shipwreck. This is our first shot of Isildur on a Númenórean ship, and it seems like he's the one that's saying that the past is with us, and then it's his father Elendil saying that the past is dead. We either move forward or we die with it. This seems like Elendil riding horses with Galadriel on Númenor, meaning that Galadriel probably comes to Númenor at some point. Then this is Durin the Fourth, saying that this could be the beginning of a new era, and obviously it's meant to be a very loaded phrase because he's holding Mithril, which is a huge deal for them, incredibly valuable. But I think they're also implying what will eventually happen, like they will mine even further down Wake the Balrog, and that will be the end of Khazad-dûm, basically. This could be a flashback to the First Age, actually showing the Sons of Feanor vowing to pursue the Cimmerals. The oath happened after the 2 trees that we saw earlier had been destroyed by Morgoth, so they were vowing to go rescue the Cimmerals at all costs. And then just based on the way that they framed this meteor scene with all the fire and the shape of the eye forming here, it just seems like they really want you to think that this is Sauron. He could be using his magic to make it seem like he's crashing to Earth, or he could actually just be using his power to straight up crash to Earth. But remember, after the War of Wrath, he went into hiding, so it seems like he's trying to use this way to come back in, pretending to be an emissary from the other Valar, like, I'm coming from the gods to give you all these gifts to help you, when really he's going to try and trick them to create the Rings of Power. The whole idea in creating the rings is that was meant to be his backup plan to take over the planet after Morgoth had been defeated. So this is like the beginning of him putting his plan into action. But everyone post all your theories in the comments below. If there's anything big during the trailer that I didn't talk about or any Easter eggs that you spotted that you have questions about, just write them below in the comments. Like I said, it's going to be a while before episodes start, but there'll be a couple other trailers that they'll release. There'll be a lot of fantasy stuff happening this fall between this and the House of the Dragon episodes that I'll be doing videos for, but they're going to be on completely different days, so don't worry about that. Comic-Con is happening next week. There's going to be a bunch of trailers like every single day, so make sure you enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. I'll try to do videos for as many things as possible. Everyone click here for my brand new Mandalorian Season 3 trailer breakdown, and click here for my brand new Loki Season 2 first look video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.